Welcome to Fun Facts Online. Today we are exploring a profound shift in human biology and engineering. We are looking at the era of neuro integration and the restoration of proprioception in bionics. Let us begin in the quiet, chlorinated air of a rehabilitation pool. There, a woman named Morgan Stickney did something that effectively defied medical history. Morgan is a bilateral amputee. She entered the water, kicked her legs, and for the first time in years, she did not just see them move, she actually felt them moving. She was not watching her prosthetics to ensure they were in the right place. She simply knew where they were. It was the same sensation you have when you know where your hand is when you wave in the dark. This experience was not a miracle of faith. It was a triumph of anatomics, a revolutionary fusion of surgical reconstruction and neural engineering, known as the Agonist Antagonist Myoneural Interface, or AMI. To understand why this is such a massive breakthrough, we have to look at the history of this field. For decades, prosthetics were defined by a single, brutal limitation, which was silence. When a limb was lost, the conversation between the brain and the body was severed. The brain would shout commands into the void, and receiving no answer, it would often scream back in the form of phantom pain. The prosthetic device itself was a silent tool. It was an inert object that had to be visually monitored and manually forced into action. It was strictly a one-way street. But today, we stand at the precipice of a new epoch in human evolution. This is the era where the machine speaks back. It is no longer about building better hinges or lighter carbon fiber. It is about wiring the synthetic into the organic, restoring not just the function of a limb, but the actual feeling of it. Central to this revolution is the restoration of proprioception. This is the mysterious sixth sense of body position and movement that allows us to play piano, walk without looking at our feet, and feel at home in our own skin. To understand the magnitude of neuro integration, we must first appreciate the devastation of standard amputation. For centuries, the surgical standard has been the guillotine approach, or simple flap closures. Surgeons would sever bone, muscle, and nerve, then wrap the remaining tissue to form a padded stump. The primary goal was simply survival and creating a platform for a socket. Biologically, however, this approach is catastrophic. The nerves that once carried massive amounts of data, terabytes of sensory information daily, are suddenly cut. These nerves act like live wires. They do not simply turn off. They continue to grow, seeking a target. Finding none, they often ball up into painful neuromas, which are disorganized tangles of nerve fibers that fire erratically. The brain, deprived of input, undergoes maladaptive plasticity. The cortical map, the brain's internal representation of the body, begins to smudge. The area representing the missing hand might be invaded by the area representing the face. This leads to bizarre sensations where touching the cheek is felt in the missing thumb. Most critically, the brain loses its proprioceptive feedback loop. It sends a command to flex the ankle, but because the muscles are severed and no longer mechanically linked, no signal returns to confirm the movement. The loop is broken. The user is left piloting their prosthesis like a remote control car, strictly by eye, and with a heavy cognitive load. The journey to fixing this and restoring proprioception began not in a robotics lab, but in the operating room. It became clear that we could not engineer a feeling limb if the biological port, the residual limb, was broken. The first major breakthrough came with targeted muscle reinnervation, or TMR, pioneered by Dr. Todd Kuiken. TMR is essentially a biological hack. Surgeons take the severed nerves, like the median or ulnar nerve in the arm, and reroute them to small, non-essential muscles in the chest or residual limb. These muscles act as biological amplifiers. Consider the case of Melissa Loomis, a patient who lost her arm to a severe infection after a raccoon bite. In a groundbreaking procedure, her surgeon rewired the nerves from her missing hand to the skin and muscles of her upper arm. When Melissa thought about closing her hand, her brain sent a signal down the median nerve. Instead of hitting a dead end, it activated a patch of muscle on her arm. Electrodes sat on top of that skin, picked up the muscle twitch, and told the bionic hand to close. But TMR offered a surprise. It allowed for sensory feedback. When researchers pushed on the specific patch of skin reinnervated by her sensory nerves, Melissa did not feel a touch on her arm. She felt a touch on her missing hand. She could feel individual fingers. This targeted sensory reinnervation was the first step toward bidirectional communication. Another technique involves Regenerative Peripheral Nerve Interfaces, or RPNI. While TMR uses existing muscles, RPNI builds new ones. Developed at the University of Michigan, RPNI involves taking a small graft of muscle from the patient's thigh, wrapping it around the severed nerve end like a burrito, and implanting it. The nerve grows into this specific graft, creating a clean, isolated signal source, free from the crosstalk of other muscles. This technique has proven massive for signal stability and pain reduction, preventing neuromas by giving the nerve a job to do. However, TMR and RPNI primarily solve the motor control and cutaneous sensation problems, meaning touch. They did not fully solve proprioception. Proprioception relies on the dynamic relationship between agonist and antagonist muscles, the push and pull mechanism. When you flex your bicep, your tricep stretches. Special sensors in the muscle called muscle spindles, and in the tendons called Golgi tendon organs, measure this stretch and tension. They tell the brain exactly where the arm is. Standard amputation destroys this pairing. This brings us back to the Agonist Antagonist Myoneural Interface, or AMI, the procedure that changed Morgan Stickney's life. Developed by the MIT Media Lab Biomechatronics Group under Dr. Hugh Hare, the AMI surgically reconstructs these muscle pairs within the residual limb. In an AMI procedure, the surgeon connects the ends of the two opposing muscles, for example the tibialis anterior and the gastrocnemius, with a synthetic tether or a tunnel. When the patient thinks about flexing their ankle, the front muscle contracts and physically stretches the back muscle. The stretch receptors in the back muscle fire, sending a natural biological signal of movement up to the brain. The result is profound. The patient does not just move the limb, they feel the limb moving. This is embodiment. The prosthesis is no longer a tool, it is part of the self. With the biology prepared, the baton passes to the engineers. The challenge is translating the language of silicon, which is electrical current, into the language of the nervous system, which relies on ion channels and action potentials. One approach is to go directly into the nerve. In the landmark case of Dennis Abo Sorensen, researchers implanted transverse intrafascicular multi-channel electrodes directly into the nerves of his upper arm. His bionic hand was equipped with sensors that detected pressure and texture. When Dennis grasped a hard object, the sensors sent a high-frequency signal to the electrodes, which zapped his nerves. When he grasped something soft, the pattern changed. Blindfolded, Dennis could distinguish between a mandarin orange, which was soft and delicate, and a baseball, which was hard and rigid. He could feel the resistance. This was the first time an amputee felt real-time touch in a home-use setting. The engineering hurdle here is the foreign body response. The body does not like metal wires sticking into its nerves. Over time, scar tissue forms around the electrodes, insulating them and degrading the signal. This is the chronic recording stability problem. Engineers are combating this with new materials, such as conductive polymers that are soft and flexible like tissue, and stealth coatings that trick the immune system. The goal is an interface that can last 20 or 30 years, not just the duration of a clinical trial. To truly integrate a bionic limb, however, it cannot just strap on. It must become part of the skeleton. This is the domain of osseointegration. Traditional prosthetics use a socket that fits over the stump. This is fraught with issues including sweating, chafing, skin breakdown, and a lack of stability. The socket acts as a dampener, absorbing the subtle forces that would otherwise tell a user about the ground they are walking on. Osseointegration involves surgically implanting a titanium rod directly into the marrow of the bone, such as the femur or humerus. The rod protrudes through the skin via a percutaneous stoma, and the robotic limb snaps directly onto it. This direct skeletal attachment provides osseoperception. Because the limb is connected to the bone, vibrations from the ground travel up the skeleton. A user can hear and feel the difference between walking on tile, carpet, or grass through their bone conduction. Historically, the risk of infection at the stoma site was the major deterrent, with deep infection rates hovering around 10 to 20%. However, new protocols and implant designs have reduced this risk significantly, making osseointegration a viable option for thousands of patients worldwide. It eliminates the socket entirely, allowing for full range of motion and a solidity that makes the limb feel like it is truly yours. While peripheral nerves are the current gold standard for limb control, the future may lie in the cortex itself. Brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, like the Utah Array or Neuralink, bypass the damaged limb entirely and tap directly into the motor cortex. In the years 2024 and 2025, we have seen an explosion in BCI viability. Companies like Neuralink have demonstrated that patients can control cursors and potentially robotic limbs with thoughts alone. The bandwidth is increasing from dozens of channels to thousands. The promise of BCI for proprioception is right in capability. If we can map the exact neural pattern of a closed hand, we can use electrical stimulation to write that pattern directly onto the sensory cortex. The user would feel their hand closing, even if they have no arm at all. This is the ultimate integration, bypassing the body's hardware to talk directly to the operating system. The impact of restoring proprioception and sensation cannot be overstated. It is not merely functional, it is existential. Patients with standard prosthetics often view the device as a dead weight or a tool like a hammer. There is a high cognitive load because they must constantly think about where the foot is and if they lifted it high enough. This mental exhaustion leads to high abandonment rates. When proprioception is restored, the cognitive load vanishes. The user can walk while talking on the phone. They can look at the sky, not the ground. Moreover, it cures the uncanny valley of the self. The restoration of sensation often eliminates phantom limb pain. The brain, finally receiving the data it has been screaming for, quiets down. Users report a sense of wholeness returning. In the words of one TMR patient, "I stopped feeling like I was dragging a machine and started feeling like I had my arm back." As we merge man and machine, we enter uncharted ethical waters. We must consider the difference between augmentation and restoration. If a bionic limb can be stronger, faster, and more sensitive than a biological one, when does therapy become enhancement? Will we see elective amputation in the future for performance gain? There is also the issue of the privacy of thought. Neural interfaces generate data. If a BCI reads your motor intentions, it is essentially reading your mind. We must ask who owns that data and if it can be hacked. Brainjacking, the malicious takeover of a neural implant, is a theoretical but terrifying possibility. Protection of neuro rights is becoming a critical legal frontier in 2025. Furthermore, there is the issue of accessibility and inequality. These technologies, including AMI surgery, osseointegration, and custom bionics, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Are we creating a class of super-abled wealthy individuals while the majority of the world's amputees struggle to get basic mechanical limbs? The global disparity in access to neuro integration is a widening chasm. Looking at the future roadmap from 2025 to 2050, we will see the dissolving of the interface. Rigid metal motors will give way to soft robotics and artificial muscles made of electroactive polymers that contract silently and feel like flesh. We will see closed-loop AI, where the prosthetic will have its own onboard AI spinal cord. It will handle the reflexes, such as stumble recovery and grip adjustment locally, sending only the high-level sensory data to the user's brain. We may also see biological mergers, where we move away from metal electrodes entirely, using optogenetics to use light to control neurons, or growing biological bridges that fuse the patient's nerves directly to the machine's inputs. In conclusion, neurointegration is more than a medical field. It is a philosophical assertion that the human body is not a fixed boundary. By restoring proprioception, we are sewing the severed edges of the self back together. For Morgan Stickney, it meant returning to the pool not as a disabled athlete fighting her equipment, but as a swimmer moving through water. For Dennis Abo Sorensen, it meant feeling the hand of a loved one. We are leaving the age of the wooden leg and the plastic socket. We are entering the age of the feeling machine. The silence has been broken, and the dialogue between brain and bionic has just begun. Thank you for listening to G Fun Facts Online.